This episode is brought to you by FXX and Hulu. Futurama returns on September 15th, blending heartfelt moments with razor-sharp humor while accidentally saving the day. The Planet Express crew is back, defying gravity and common sense. From the creator of The Simpsons comes 10 new episodes where the romance is hotter, the threats are bigger, and the action hits harder. Don't miss the all-new season of Futurama returning September 15th at 8 p.m. Watch it on FXX or stream it on Hulu.
Welcome to
Only Murders in the Building,
the official podcast.
Join me, Michael Cyril Creighton, as we go behind the scenes with some of the amazing actors, writers, and crew from season 5.
The audience should never stop suspecting anything.
How can you not be funny crawling around on a coffin?
No, that's true.
Catch Only Murders in the Building official podcast, now streaming wherever you get your podcasts. And watch Only Murders in the Building, streaming on Hulu and Hulu on Disney Plus for bundle subscribers. Terms apply.
Welcome to another episode of The Eagle, a Times Union podcast. I'm Jessica Marshall. Thousands of children in the Capital Region and the Hudson Valley had their first day of school this past week. A few journalists had their first day of work here at the Times Union, too. Stephanie Gravalese and Shannon Lee are our first new dining critics in over a decade, and we couldn't be more excited to have these two on board. Table Hopping's Steve Barnes joins us now to introduce Stephanie and Shannon.
Hi, Stephanie. Hi, Shannon. Let's jump right in. Why are you qualified to review restaurants? A restaurant critic can have a direct and sometimes lasting impact on the incomes of people who live in our area. So why are you qualified to render that opinion, Stephanie?
I've been writing about food for almost a decade, but have been working in and around food for much longer than that. In addition to having had a background in doing recipe development and even cookbook testing, I have an understanding of what goes into a food when it lands at a diner's table, and can take all of those considerations when walking through a meal and tasting it and providing value to readers to help them make decisions with their hard-earned money.
Thanks. And that is one of the key, while you are evaluating a restaurant in the scheme of, restaurants circa 2025 and going forward, it's a consumer guide. Mm-hmm. Are you saying somebody should be paying money to go out for dinner, maybe to hire a sitter, and to make an evening of it? Because unlike critics, the normal public pays for their food. So Shannon, what about you? Same question. Why are you qualified, and why should people trust you when you say, I went to this place, you should go here too, or skip it?
As someone who has been kind of in the sort of critic space from more of an art standpoint for this decade, I think I'm constantly asking myself, what is the role of the critic in any industry? And especially now, with social media, with Google reviews, with Yelp, etc., like everyone has a public platform to voice their opinion on restaurants. I know there are plenty of Facebook groups where people are very vocal about their opinions on the regional dining scene. But I think, to echo Stephanie's point, I think there is when it comes to a restaurant critic, I think there is a sort of broader, holistic consideration for what goes into a restaurant, what goes into developing a menu, creating the thing that is presented to you at your table, and having that context. And also, I think there's a kind of sense of responsibility that the critic has toward the broader restaurant ecosystem that, wants to encourage something that thrives.
Most people don't wear fashions that are on the runways that you see in Paris and Milan and walking into the Met Gala. And yet they're of huge interest to the public. Everybody's talking about what somebody wore to the Oscars, what somebody wore to the Met Gala. And it rarely has any bearing on how people dress every day. Similarly, there is a great interest in high-end restaurants as a spectator sport, or just something interesting that we may eventually trickle down. The first airbags in cars were in very expensive Mercedes. Similarly, with anti-lock brakes, and they were developed, 50 some years ago, didn't trickle down to everyday cars until much, much later. But what for you, because I know both of you like hole in the wall places, you like casual places, family run, give me some really good food made honestly that also is not too expensive. But what is the role for you? And we'll start with you, Stephanie, for something that really is quite high end and is quite progressive, cutting edge, and they're just knocking it out of the park. Not something that is emperor's new clothes, but something you actually believe, wow, this is worth $300 a person, or whatever that turns out to be. What is the role of a restaurant like that for a mainstream media outlet covering it?
For a mainstream media outlet, high-end restaurants and the coverage of them is part of covering the swath of readers, because you have readers that are going to love the family-owned, small, quote, hole in the wall spaces, and folks looking for those experiences and folks looking for the $300 tasting menu. There's something also in sharing that whole spectrum of experiences and showing the spectacle and the excitement that the chef gets and the space that they get to put into putting together that meal. And while it may not be something that is economically accessible for all folks, if there are readers, there are also, it allows, a publication to be ahead, to see what's ahead. Like there are just like the anti-lock brakes and car in airbags, to even the food trends that we see in this, see in main metros trickling down to larger markets. There's value there because a reader who may not afford may not be the kind of dining that they choose to go. They get to see what's out there.
Shannon, let's switch the question up for you. Tell me about going to a really expensive place that you loved.
I recently went to London for the first time in like a decade, and I got to go to Fergus Henderson's restaurant, or one of his restaurants, St. John's. And I like wasn't expecting to be blown away, but I think as I was sitting there like reviewing the menu, eating the food, I think it really struck me how much of a dining revolution his philosophy prompted, even though like this concept of nose to tail eating in more or less every other part of the world is like the de facto norm of how people eat. For this to become like in vogue in a high-end restaurant in London, and then to become this like adopted philosophy for like so many like foodies around the world in the last 20 years. Now you see it everywhere. Like without that restaurant, like bone marrow wouldn't be a thing people ate, wouldn't be this like in vogue posh thing. So in that way, I think like these high-end restaurants have this capacity to like create new trends, new fashions and food to introduce and like reinvent culture in like this really expansive way. And that's exciting.
Both of you, at least what I know so far, both of you are nicer than some dining critics in terms of your opinions. What is the role of negativity? And I come at this from somebody who once in a concert review, I said that Andrea Bocelli navigated the runs in La Donna Immobile with all the grace of a baby giraffe falling downstairs. What is, if you said the tomato sauce was a little acidic, is that fine? But isn't it better to say that the tomato sauce made me worried I'd lose the enamel off my teeth? What's your view on being entertainingly negative?
I think it depends on like to what end. Entertainment, I think, is good for kind of capturing the reader's imagination. I was actually last night, the New Yorker published this really great essay on like how critics have gone soft, particularly in music criticism, and like whether or not we need more acidity in criticism at large. But I will always love like a very poetically phrased spicy takedown.
Right, because as Dorothy Parker said, sometimes it's not enough merely to toss it aside. It should be thrown with great force. Stephanie, your turn. If you love something, you want to shake people by the lapels and say, this is
Absolutely.
awesome. You have to
Absolutely.
try this menudo. You have to try whatever it is that's exciting me. But if something's really bad,
My introduction to criticism was I spent a lot of time writing about beer, and I have done some review work and tasting more in a non-alcoholic space, which of course is developing. But the thing I was taught by beer judges that were colleagues of mine were this is not about good or bad. Does this taste like an IPA? Are these the notes of an IPA, right? And so that was always how I approached it. It's like, is this scallop chewy like gum, or is this like, is it cutting through? That's kind of how I've thought about criticism. And I understand being descriptive as a means of like driving it home that this didn't hit, but I also think about impact, and if something doesn't meet what it's supposed to, naming it is important. It's an interesting question.
I mean, obviously, if something is a little family restaurant that took over some existing space and they didn't do much and they just got the doors open, you know, we're not going to bring a full hammer down on them. But if somebody's charging you $87 for a steak that comes out medium well instead of a requested medium rare, they're worth calling out, are they not?
100%.
Yeah.
Shannon, and I'm asking you, starting with you, just because this came from a Culinary Institute of America professor, he told me his definition of good service was hot food served hot, cold food served cold, in a timely and accommodating manner at a price in which the diner finds value. And that seemed to me that applied anywhere, from a hot dog cart all the way up to Per Se or the French Laundry or La Bernadette.
Mhm.
So when you approach a place, are you asking what it is that they are trying to do and evaluating it? Is that the fair way to approach it? To say, who are you and what are you doing, and do you meet that standard? So Shannon, is that your approach?
Maybe what separates a critic from maybe like the quote unquote like layman reviewer is that a critic is someone who is able to kind of disengage their own taste a little bit in favor of like talking about, in this instance, food in a sort of quote unquote objective set of parameters. So, like Stephanie, what you were saying about reviewing beer, like, is the IPA doing IPA stuff? Is the scallop scalloping? Like understanding the context under which a restaurant is operating and are they performing as they should be within those sort of like expectations that are dictated by how they talk about themselves, their price point, etc.
One last thing, Stephanie, will go with you. The last thing in a restaurant that made you excited all over again about experiencing food you hadn't had before.
So I always tell my friends that if I'm not talking during a meal, it's because I like what I'm eating. So if you're um and the last meal that made me feel that way was a beer dinner. This was while I was away in Holland. What lit me up is this course that had an old world style beer and they paired it with venison. I grew up eating, with hunters eating venison, this piece of meat being treated with such reverence and tasted delicious. Not only brought me back to my childhood, but also showed me how a protein like that can be treated with such reverence. I was like, it just made me, I blushed thinking about it. And I
Nice.
mean, it tasted good, but also the care that they took.
Hmm.
It's just like, okay, I see that they're having fun here. This is what it's about.
Shannon, what was your moment like in Ratatouille where that awful critic gets the ratatouille and then what did that to you most recently?
Oh, my ratatouille moment. There's this wine bar in Chinatown on Doyer Street in Manhattan. that opened up called Lay. It's like a tiny 25, 30 person spot. And it's mostly a wine bar, but everyone's talking about the food that Chef Patty has developed. And her approach to cooking is just like so distinct, so imaginative. You know, there's like this Sichuan pink peppercorn, like pickled celery that's like one of the best things I've ever eaten. I don't know, she just strikes a great balance of like really touching all points without going overboard.
I would not have thought I would drive 2.5 to 3 hours to get pickled celery, but
It's exceptional.
I'm on my way. This has been delightful. I appreciate it. And I really look forward to beginning a working relationship with the two of you and then working through all of the many possibilities, because there are thousands of them. And we're going to winnow that down to dozens over the next year that we want to tell readers about. Hopefully mostly good, but sometimes when they should spend their money elsewhere. So this is Steve Barnes from the Times-Union. We've been talking to Stephanie Gravalese, who is our Albany-based restaurant critic, and Shannon Lee, who is our Hudson Valley-based restaurant critic. Look for them in print in the Unwind section of the Sunday Times-Union and also online at timesunion.com.
You can read Shannon and Stephanie's restaurant reviews in print or online at timesunion.com starting at the end of this month. You can also get the latest news from the local dining scene delivered straight to your inbox. Just head on over to timesunion.com and sign up for Steve Barnes' Table Hopping newsletter. If you missed last week's episode, we have a new limited series true crime podcast here at the Times-Union. It's called The Girl in the Pond. It's about the unsolved murder in Sand Lake, New York, of a 20-year-old woman named Hazel Drew in 1908. It's a fascinating look back in time at a case that still haunts many in Rensselaer County and beyond today. New episodes every Tuesday. Listen at timesunion.com, on the Times-Union app, or wherever you get your podcasts. That's it for this week. We will be back soon with more from inside the newsroom. The Eagle is a production of the Times-Union. It's produced and edited by myself, Jessica Marshall, with help from Erica Smith and the Times-Union digital team. Our music is Flyin' by Top Floor by Getty Images. Special thanks to Steve Barnes for his contribution to this episode. Got questions or comments about the Eagle or any of our podcasts? Email us at podcast@timesunion.com. In July of 1908, America was transfixed by the murder of a young woman in upstate New York.
Either Hazel came down here alive or dead. We don't know. I think she was alive.
She was found floating in a country pond, her death shrouded in mystery, her killer unknown. Was she murdered by a spurned lover? Was she leading a secret double life outside of her station as a governess to the wealthy residents of Troy, New York? Did she know too many secrets?
She was obviously trying to create a better life for herself, and she knew how to maneuver to make it work for her, and it worked until it didn't.
In this new limited series podcast from the Times-Union, we'll go back in time to an era of wealth and prosperity, of rampant political corruption, and of secrets and lies in upstate New York. We'll unravel the mystery of the life and death of one young woman, and why her story still resonates more than a century later.
'Tis the last rose of summer left blooming alone.
Listen to The Girl in the Pond at timesunion.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Whether it's in Drive, Dropbox, Slack, or that folder called Ugh, Dropbox Dash finds it fast. Smart Search. built for messy humans. Learn more at Dropbox.com/dash.